Chapter 20 is about the right to equal opportunity. So there's a couple of key words we need to get into before we go through the chapter. The first one is equal protection, and equal protection means receiving the same treatment under the law as everyone else. So what that means is you shouldn't be treated differently because of your race, religion, age, or sex. Equal opportunity means receiving the same chance as everybody else. Now that one gets a little bit tricky because it doesn't mean that everyone has to get the exact same options or the exact same treatment, but it does mean that everyone should receive a fair shot at something. There's due process, which is the process that the laws are carried out, and then discrimination is the act of treating someone unfairly. So we're going to talk about something that started a change in how we view equal opportunity and civil rights. On December of 1955, a woman in Alabama was waiting for a bus. When the bus came, she paid for a ticket, and she took a seat in the colored section of the bus, but at the closest seat to the front. So this was back when segregation laws were still around for certain things like public transportation. So what happened is when the bus became full, the bus driver told her that she had to give up her seat and let a white man sit there, and she refused. So she refused because she knew that this law was unfair and violated the Constitution. So Rosa Parks refused to give up the seat, and she ends up getting arrested for it. So when she gets arrested, it becomes a pretty big scene because she had done nothing wrong. She was sitting in the seat that she had paid for, and she was being told to give up that seat. So she appeals her case because she knows that she should be right, but the law is wrong. Eventually, her case goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and more than a year later, the Supreme Court overturned her conviction. And remember, overturn is when they throw out the previous verdict. The court decided that Rosa Parks had as much right to sit in that seat as anyone else. She was riding public transportation, and it was unconstitutional to have a law that favored one group of people. It violated her 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection under the law. So the Constitution doesn't mention the words equal opportunity, but the 14th Amendment guarantees due process and equal protection. And the easiest way to sum that up is that all people should be treated fairly. Due process means the government must always give you your constitutional rights. Equal protection means the law must treat all people equally, which we know is not how things always work. If equal protection was actually 100% effective and it worked the way it should, you wouldn't see two people who commit the same crime that have similar records get different punishments. But these things are set up to try to encourage our government and our society to be more equal. So it is illegal to treat people unfairly because of race, religion, sex, age, or background. So oftentimes people can be the victim of discrimination, and pretty much anybody can be discriminated against and has been discriminated against if you look back at different times in history. There's been many times when African Americans, Latinos, and people with physical disabilities have all been discriminated against in American history. There's been certain laws that have only affected these groups of people far more than other groups of people. The 14th Amendment says that states may not deny people their constitutional rights. It also says that state and local laws must protect those rights. So there's been a couple of things people in our government have done to try to ensure that people have equal opportunity and equal protection. There's been things passed like the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and multiple different things they've done. These acts make discrimination in housing, education, and jobs against the law. So it makes it illegal for a school to discriminate or for an employer to discriminate. The laws do not say that everybody must be treated exactly the same, but they do say that nobody can be treated unfairly. So, what that means, like, let's pretend that we're back in school, and normally I give you guys all pretty much the same test, but we get a new student who is blind. Would it be fair for me to give that student the exact same test I give everyone else? The answer is no. Would it be fair for me to give them a different test? Most likely, yes. Because as long as it's testing the same material and they have an equal shot at success, it wouldn't be discrimination. So, an example it gives here, suppose a man with one arm wants a job working construction where, you have to be lifting heavy things all day and you really need both arms to do the job. Would the employer be allowed to refuse to hire him? In most cases, yes. But if he proved he could actually do the job, then it could be discrimination if they don't hire him. So there's been lots of times in our history where discrimination has happened. It's happened with housing a lot. There was times when entire neighborhoods would agree to not sell their houses to certain types of families, usually black families. Some owners of houses and apartment buildings would not sell or rent to people because of their race, religion, age, or background. And that's illegal. That's discrimination. But since the Constitution only covers acts of government, people who owned private property were finding ways around those rules. But once the Civil Rights Act was passed, it changed things. Now discrimination is against the law when it comes to housing. So, I'll give you an example. Like, let's say that you're selling your house and you have two different families making offers on your house. You're asking for $100,000. And one family gives you an offer. They say, we'll pay you $105,000. And the other family says, we'll pay you $85,000. It's not discrimination if you take the better offer in price, but it would be discrimination if you refuse to sell to somebody specifically because of their race or religion. The Constitution does not guarantee everybody a right to public education, but pretty much every state has a law that says young people must go to school. The 14th Amendment guarantees everybody an equal chance to use those public schools. That hasn't always been the case. At one time, the schools were set up to be separate but equal. So they had separate schools for white and black students. Now, they justified this by saying the two different schools were exactly the same quality, but that wasn't the case. Pretty often, the black schools would not have new textbooks. They wouldn't have, enough staff. They would have the old, hand-me-down buildings. In 1954, the Supreme Court decided that segregating schools was unconstitutional. And they said if you keep students separate based on their race, you're taking away their right to equal opportunity, their right to, succeed. Today, public schools must give all students an equal chance for an education. And this connects back to that example I gave a few minutes ago about giving different versions of a test to make sure that everyone's able to participate. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act said that federal government can stop funding for schools that get caught discriminating against people. Okay, so in jobs, there's times when certain workers make less than other workers. So if I make less money than a teacher who's been teaching for 30 years, that's not discrimination because they're making more money than me because they have more experience. But there are multiple times when people have been discriminated against when it comes to jobs. Very often, it's women who are paid less money than men, even when they're doing the same exact work. And the 14th Amendment tries to stop this, but it can only be used in things that are connected to the government, federal and state government, and local government. It has no bearing on people's private businesses. And our Congress, well, our government has tried to change that. There was something that they tried to pass called the Equal Pay Act. So, under the Equal Pay Act, any company that gets money from the government cannot discriminate. So, if you receive any kind of government money, funding, or assistance, you cannot discriminate. In 1972, people in Congress tried to get an amendment passed to the Constitution. And if you guys remember, getting an amendment passed is very difficult. You need 2/3 of Congress and 3/4 of the states to sign off on an amendment to add it to the Constitution. That's why it's only been amended 27 times. It's pretty difficult to change. So they suggested something called the Equal Rights Amendment, and the Equal Rights Amendment was set up to guarantee equal rights to women in all areas of employment, especially like work and pay. By 1982, what happened is the amendment never passed. It needed 3 more states to sign off on it for it to become official, and it basically expired. Okay guys, so I need you to go into Google Classroom and you're going to open up chapter 20 and work on the worksheet.